Welcome to the Elevating Funeral Service podcast. If you want to run a successful funeral home, cemetery, or pet cremation service, you don't have to be the one that has the lowest price. You do need to be the one that offers the most value, provides the best customer experience, and clearly communicates that in your marketing. On this weekly podcast, Ellery and Welton will show easy ways to demonstrate value to families and create differentiation that helps you stand out from the competition. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Elevating Funeral Service. I'm with my good friend Welton Hong. We've got Tyler Yamasaki with Parting Pro. And this is a podcast where we talk about how to add more value for your families, how to create a better customer experience, and ultimately end up being more competitive. Today we're going to be talking about something that we feel is important. It was important before, but now with the lockdown that everyone's in and the inability to kind of gather or even make arrangements, we feel like what we're going to talk about today is even more important. And a lot more people are doing this now. So it's going to be a topic, and that what we're going to talk about today is e-commerce for funeral homes. So welcome, Tyler. Welcome, Welton. So just to kind of jump right into this thing, what we're going to be talking about is someone coming to a funeral home website, purchasing a cremation, a burial, etc., walking through the process, checking out, paying for it, right? Okay. So why don't we just start with what that means? What is e-commerce for funeral homes? Okay, we all know what e-commerce is. There's probably nobody listening that hasn't, put money on a credit card, spent money online. We all know what that is. What does that look like for a funeral home? Because when you think about it, you're typically not going to, choose this for a funeral home. Let's grab an outer burial container, add to cart. This just isn't something that we think about. So what does that look like? What is e-commerce for funeral homes?
So I think e-commerce for funeral homes is turning the entire arrangement experience into using technology to turn that into something you can do online. I don't think it's just adding a form or putting just a store where I can buy a casket or buy an urn into a shopping cart. I think it's really understanding what is the customer faced with, what kind of problems do they have, what kind of questions are they going to have, and being able to present them with something that's transparent. It explains what they need to see, what they need to do, and then ultimately get them to payment or get them to submitting and letting you know what their arrangements are so that you can handle that family in, online or offline.
Okay. Basically just taking what you're doing now and just making it an online experience.
Yeah.
What do you think when you think of e-commerce for funeral homes?
What I think is something swift, easy, for those who really love to do homework. Like me, I'm a geek. I love to do homework. Ideally, if I can do all the research online first, I would do that first before I need to talk to a human being. I just feel more comfortable, more confident, especially if I don't know anything about the funeral service or the funeral industry. I would do a lot of research before I physically pick up the phone and call somebody up. Ideally, if I can do the homework myself, add to shopping cart, the whole experience, I would love that even better. I'm a nerd. I would rather do everything on my own.
I don't think you need to be a nerd to feel that way now. I mean, I think a lot of people really do now, which kind of just brings us into the next thing, which is why is it important to have that on a website? So again, backing up, just, e-commerce for a funeral home just means, giving people that want it the ability to just go through the arrangement process online, up to and including the payment process, and just do everything online. So let's talk. And I think there's a lot of reasons why. Why is it important? I'll share that. People just want to do stuff on their own now, right? People want to feel like they're in control. We talked about this kind of on this, pre-episode here when we were chatting about it. 30 years ago, if somebody died, you would call the funeral director and you would say, "Hey, look, my father just passed away." Like that was the only thing you had to do, because they would swoop in and they would take care of everything. Well, now, because that is so fragmented and because we shop differently, we interact differently, we live online, people want to have more and more control over that. It doesn't necessarily mean they don't want the funeral home involved. It means that they want to do what they want to do first, right? So I think it's important just as a demonstration that, you are up to date, right? And that you are offering what consumers want. Even if they don't use it, you're offering that. So as a consumer, I would want it simply because I like to do a lot of research on my own. I don't like to be sold. Not that a funeral director is selling like a car salesman's selling, but I just like to have my confidence knowing everything I can, so that when I pick the phone up, I'm talking to somebody, I'm more educated, the process is a lot more efficient. And this is talking about lots of different things, not just the funeral business, but before any kind of purchase, I love to do a lot of research online. So I agree with that, Welton. What are some of the reasons why you think it's important that a funeral home have this? I mean, now, of course, it's important because they can't go anywhere, right? And families are going to want to do this online, or they have to. But anyway, go ahead.
So I think expectations have changed too. I think you go to a business, and if you were to go somewhere, let's say a merchandise business, to try to buy something online, and they don't have an online store or a way to purchase it online, you kind of think of what's wrong with this company, or what is this? Why is this company lacking this functionality? So I think a funeral home, we're so used to being able to do everything online. And so if you don't have at least that option, it almost makes the consumer wonder why their expectations are not being met, whether they're going to use it or not. It's more of a, why isn't there fluency of technology or fluency of just doing business to the level of where I'm expecting it to be? And so I think that ultimately starts to create distrust. And I think trust is one of the most important things that we want to cross when we're, servicing a family or a customer or anyone we're doing business with.
Great.
Tyler, yeah, I love the word you use, option, because it's not the only avenue. This does not replace the phone calls. There's just one other channel, one other option for them.
Yeah. I love the point about the expectation. You're right. When you get there, could you imagine if you went to you looked up a funeral home and they don't have a website? Okay, there's something wrong, right? I can't email them. There's something wrong. I can't do this online. And again, the consumers that are online right now, they may have never shopped for a funeral before. They don't even know what to expect, but there's a baseline expectation, right? And in that funeral home's online experience, whether you like it or not, you're going to be judged based upon all of the other online experiences they have, because if they can do this nice, smooth thing with everything else, they're going to expect you to be able to do the same thing. I've kind of beaten this point to death, but you look at Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A, everybody thinks they're the greatest company out there. And look, it's a good chicken sandwich, don't get me wrong, okay? But it's not like earth-shattering, blow my mind. But what happens is everyone else is so bad, right, that the expectation is so low that the only thing Chick-fil-A has to do is to make sure the order's right and say my pleasure, and they're the king of the world.
Right.
I mean, it's crazy, right? It's almost unfair. Well, unfortunately for funeral homes, you're going to be judged on how easy others make it, right? If you're an e-commerce retailer, not the funeral home, but you're a retailer, you're going to be judged based upon how easy Amazon's making it. I know it's totally unfair, but that's the truth, right? You want to buy something, you better make it as simple as Amazon, because that's where I can go, okay? So I love that point about the expectations. And when they get there and they don't have that, that's just like a tree across the road. They're like, why? Let me back up and see if this other funeral home has that. So great point. So let's talk then, jump in real quick. So what are funeral homes' concerns? Obviously, they don't have it on there for a reason, right? And, they either don't know it's an option, right? Or they don't want to have it on there, or they haven't met the people that can put it on there. But let's just say they know that it's an option. Let's say they know the tech providers that can put it on their website. Now they have to decide yes or no, and they're in between. What are their concerns? What do you think, Welton?
I think typically they still are afraid they're going to lose the whole customer experience. Especially, I also think that many of them I talk to, they think only direct cremation families will be using e-commerce. And from my point of view, it's not just the direct cremation families, even burials, cremation with a service, they would, right, use the e-checkout process if it's set up correctly.
Yeah, I think if we take a step back, a lot of what we hear is they start to think of a family as a certain type of family, and they treat them that way.
Right.
They think, okay, this is an online customer, whether that's direct cremation or immediate burial or something. Now we're going to only treat them as a online customer. And then if it's an in-person customer, they want to do everything in person. They want to meet with the family. They want to meet with the director, blah, blah, blah. I think what you end up finding, though, is that every family is kind of an all-encompassing family, right? They're all going to be dynamic. They're all going to have different people that would be or prefer to do things certain ways, right? So just because a family may want to start the online arrangement or start the arrangement online, maybe they don't want to complete the arrangement online, or maybe they want to come in person, but that doesn't mean that they have to do all the paperwork and signing in person with a pen, right? Why can't they communicate with the family or communicate with the director by text or email? Or, I think thinking of a family just online or thinking of a family just in person is going to limit the way you serve the family. I think your online tools should just be thought of as another tool to help you do your job better. And so when you kind of limit that, you're gonna lose that type of trust or the fluency that you're looking for.
Yeah, great point. Welton, you're talking about them, losing control, right, of the experience. In this market, you're going to have to give up some control, right? You're going to have to trust that your families can get through this, this online thing without you, right? That, you're needed, don't get me wrong, but, we need to remove ego out of this thing, right? And say, okay, if this family wants to do this online, we either provide the tools and the options for them to do that, or somebody else will be happy to, okay? And believe me, every funeral home in every town's facing more competition now than they've ever faced before, okay? So you're going to have to be able to have these options out there. And right now, I think it's more important, just like webcasting. Webcasting 2 months ago was an option, and now it's required, right? And this is as well, because you're not going to be able to have families come in there. I see a couple concerns that I see. One is I think that, a lot of if you go back and you look at why don't funeral homes put prices online? They don't put prices online because they're afraid they can't justify them, and I actually just did say that, or they're afraid that they can't explain it properly, right? That they can't understand that a family won't. In other words, a lot of funeral homes won't put a price online because they feel like they can't give that consumer an exact price, right, without asking them a bunch of questions. Right. Well, they may feel the same way about doing the online e-commerce thing. Like, how do we even know how much this is? There is a way. This is all done with design, right? And we'll talk about this in a minute, but this is all about the experience. The technical capabilities of you checking somebody out online is simple code, right? You're building out a form and a process and a wizard that's going to say step 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the easy part. The harder part is to get it right is the design of it, right? You have to instill confidence in the design. When I mean design, I don't mean the pictures. I mean the copy, right? What you're saying to that consumer online. So as a funeral home owner, if I was a funeral home owner, if I designed this in a way that I knew that those customers were going to be guided through this in a way that I would want to be guided through this, I'd be totally fine with it. If I felt like this was going to be like Amazon, grab a casket, grab this, add to cart, I wouldn't want it either. So I think that the funeral homes are concerned about the experience. Okay. I think in kind of a far-flung way, and I hope no one really believes this, but some may not want to do it because they feel like they're going to be replaced. Funeral service will never become fully self-service. It's just not going to happen, right? No. These are tools, like you said, Tyler, that augment what you do, that give you more efficiency in your business, but it's never going to replace the funeral director, okay? And I think that when we talk about showing empathy every week on the show, that shows empathy. When you put that out there for that family and say, look, Tyler, here's a tool you can use, that's showing empathy. That's saying that I care about what makes your life easier. I want to jump back up and say two things really quick. There are two things that I see really valuable to having an online arrangement process for a funeral home website. One is because everyone wants to do it, but two, I've seen a lot of funeral homes that are dealing with, and we're going to kind of bring about three topics into one here. But I see a lot of funeral homes that are dealing with discounters in their area, right? Whether you call them discounters, direct cremation, disposal companies, minimal service providers, whatever moniker you want to give them, they're dealing with it. So you got a full service funeral home that is now dealing with somebody on the other side of town who's selling cremation at a much cheaper price because their overhead is a lot lower, okay? Right. And they have a hard time competing with that. And I have also seen funeral homes that are full service funeral homes. Then they go to compete with the direct cremation company. Instead of competing their full service firm against that direct cremation company, they'll go start their own direct cremation competitor, right? We've all seen this. I've seen it many, many, many times. Well, here's the problem. You have a lot of funeral homes that have a hard time explaining to a family why a price is one price here and another price over here, even internally. So what you could say is, this goes back to like the good, better, and best options. Okay. So if a family came up to you and said, Tyler, why is, Joe's cremation over here, $1,100, right? And this one over here, and it's your funeral home, it's $3,400. Well, how much disparity could there be? Like what did they choose that you didn't? That's hard for someone to justify. Funeral homes have a hard time explaining that. And I get that, right? Because they're used to being in the arrangement room with them. They're used to instilling trust and confidence there, walking them through that. And now you're having to have your website do it. So what I've seen firsthand, and I've seen this done very, very well, is if you have a online option, okay, then what you've done is you've just built in justification for a lower price. Whether that's a lower price that you want to discount in-house, whether it's a lower price that you want to give because you have a direct cremation arm of your company, but it gives you built-in justification. So if you could say, well, Tyler, why is it $1,100 at your direct cremation company over here and it's $2,400 at your full service funeral home? Well, it's because we're doing online here, right? And so you can use that as a bit of a justification. I've seen that done, and I've seen it done very well. So Tyler, Welton, have you seen that as well?
Oh yeah, seen that all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's quite a bit of our clients. They also do have a separate brand.
Yeah.
To compete with a discounter.
Yeah.
And I think as long as they can justify that indeed this service, right, doesn't include this, that, and that, everything's done online, saves cost, then that's fine. As long as they can justify it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Any other concerns, you think?
No.
So Tyler, yeah, I think if I could ask you, this is typically what my clients typically ask about these type of e-commerce checkout. It's a thought by having this e-checkout process on their website, they never have to enter their phone anymore. Is that true or not?
No, I think if anything, it should be a tool that is going to make more phone calls, right? Like, to build more trust. Like, this whole thing about an online platform is not, a big part of it is getting people to go through and being able to arrange and all that stuff on their own. But a big part of it is not, it's really just build that trust so that a family can come onto your website and think like, oh, I can be served online. These people, these funeral homes know what they're doing, right? These guys are on top of their game. So, I feel comfortable calling.
Mm-hmm.
I could call the phone number. I don't necessarily have to go online and purchase everything 100%, right? You go to a luxury car brand website, right? And if they didn't have any picture of their cars or any idea of what you're buying, you're not gonna feel like you learned anything from that website. You're not gonna feel trustworthy in wanting to call, right? But if you go on there and you build a car and you're like, okay, I know what my options are. Now I can call the funeral home. I don't think that you need to classify them as a one type of customer and that you're just trying to ignore your phone or ignore them and not have that part of your business anymore. I think it's an all-encompassing, multifaceted type of business that we're going to need to serve families in now.
That's a great point. I had something come to mind that happened to me this past summer, and all I could do is think about when you're talking about, people coming to that website and seeing, do you offer this or do you not offer this? So my wife wrangled me into having a yard sale last summer, right? We cleaned out, 18 years worth of crap, half a semi-trailer it felt like. And we live in the back of a neighborhood. So we actually had it at my office, out in front of my office, and I'm on the main street here in town. And I saw all these people driving by, right? We'd have people that would stop and walk around, look at all the tables and all that. And by the way, I'm not ever going to get in the yard sale business. But we also had these drive-bys where they would drive by and they go real slow and they'd be, they're trying to find out if there's something interesting, and then they would stop by. And all I thought about that day was just the metaphor of a funeral home website. And you think about all the traffic that funeral home website gets, which sometimes is more than any other business in town just by nature of the obituaries, right? You can't buy that kind of traffic even.
No.
So funeral homes get it, and they get it for free. But then people are coming by and they're like that drive-by, right? And you just wonder if the funeral home could really see how many people come to that and then leave, they would then see how many opportunities they're missing right? To make this available. Because I think what they're thinking about is, I think they're thinking, say, okay, I served 10 families last month. Out of those 10, how many would have wanted to do this online? Well, you're now quantifying everything by that number by 10, right? Well, that's not the number, right? The number is the number of people that experienced your brand, the number of people that have been on your website. And if you knew that number, you'd realize how small that 10 really, really is, right? Because your conversion rate's nowhere near what you think it is, right? It's not 10. Okay, it's not 10 out of 10. You missed thousands of opportunities by not having that kind of stuff on your website. Right. So lastly, then let's talk about the fourth part, which would be, so I'm a funeral home owner. I want this on my website. What should the basics of this thing be? So the one thing I thought about was that it should be empathetic, right? I mean, it should just be built with bricks of empathy. I would think that if I'm the consumer, it should know my concerns and alleviate my concerns as I'm going through this experience, right? It knows that I'm going to say, hey, what does that price mean, right? It might have something that explains what that price means. Or, hey, it understands that I don't know what an outer burial container is, or I don't know what, this or that is, and it should explain that to me. So I think it should be, it have a lot of empathy into the product, in the design. What do you guys think? What should this thing look like?
It needs to be very simple too. Like, you can't get lost. We, at our company, we use what's called like the mom test. And so I'll make my mom, who's there, actually go through and test features, or, go through it. And because if, you don't know the population that's going to use it.
Right.
And someone like my mom, who's not super technically proficient, I mean, she gets by, but if she gets stuck, then there's going to be a whole population that won't use it as well, right? So you kind of have to understand how easy it is. And so if it's not easy, that doesn't mean cheap, and doesn't mean you're withholding information, but you want to make the experience of simplicity built into the online arrangement process.
Tyler, how granular are funeral homes getting with that? So I think about, let's say I'm going through it on, let's do two things. On the cremation side, I mean, how many urns are they showing them, for example? Are they showing them 4 urns to keep the process simple, or are they showing them, 1,500 different urns? I mean, what are most of them doing?
We've found that 9 to 15, 9 to 12, 9 to 15, around that range. You start to put 20, 30, 40, like we would have some customers who we would start with them. We would try to understand what their process was before we launch. And we would call them and almost like mystery shop them. And they would send us like the Crescent catalog, which is 92 pages, and say, pick an urn from here. And then we could do an arrangement. There's a lot of products there, and I'm sure, they're all really nice, but at the same time, that's not an effective way of showing. So what we do is we try to ask people to give us their top 10, top 20 sellers, and we'll put those up, because, that's going to cover 80 to 85% of everyone that's going to go through. Yeah. By giving them too many options, you're going to have decision fatigue that the family will, could go through and think, oh, there's so many here. Why don't I go check Amazon? Why don't I go check somewhere else? Why don't I go, there's a million things that could happen to distract them from completing that. So we found that the simpler, the better. You want to still give them options, but you don't want to give them every option, because then it just becomes infinite. Right. Too long.
Yeah, like I have this vision in my mind of going through this and just, this complicated process. And that's why I think that's right. I mean, if I were doing it, if I was the funeral home owner, I would want to have like 3 choices, right? Or 5 or 10 at most, just to keep them moving, because you don't want to get paralyzed in one step of the process because you can't make a decision, to move forward. Right. So I really like that idea. What about on the burial side? So, let's say, and this might just be like a process question for when a funeral home gets set up, but I mean, do you see people, picking out, they pick the casket out? I mean, there's a lot of questions on the casket, right? 'Cause you're talking about something that's expensive. And when you're walking around the arrangement room, it's not that this wood is prettier and that's why it's twice as much, right? I mean, there's something there. They don't know what 18 gauge means, 16 gauge. Do they explain a lot of that stuff in the process?
They do add descriptions. But you still kind of want to limit them, right? Kind of what price range you want to show. So you're going to show more in a price range that you understand, right? You're not going to put a $1,000 casket and the $10,000 casket in there, because you're just not going to serve that wide range of type of customer.
Right. Good point.
Still want to limit it. and still understand who your clientele is that is going to use it.
Interestingly, I wonder, this goes back to Welton's point about, people think it's for direct cremation companies only, right? I think that there are far more direct cremation companies using this right now than burial companies. But I think that with this COVID-19 pandemic, you're going to see a lot more jumping on board right now. And then that'll become the baseline. So I expect that you'll see a lot more traditional funeral homes adding e-commerce, which means then you'll have a lot more people going through it. I wonder if there's probably not now, but I wonder if we could ever get some data on what they would choose. Like, does that increase the revenue? Does it decrease the revenue? Because if you're like most pricing plans, right, there's a good, better, and best, and people hit the middle. That's why you do that. That's why if you have two options, don't ever do that because they're going to pick the lowest option, right? Yeah, you pick the middle. So I wonder, that would be interesting if there was ever some correlation between people that are doing it online and what that base revenue was, if that would have went up or down. Just an aside on that. I think, to me, I think the process needs to instill trust, right? I need to feel confident, right? Like, I've never done this before and someone's died, right? Like, that's serious. That's a big thing.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of different ways to instill trust, but for me, I think it should be done in copy, right? In the words, in what you say. I was joking earlier, instilling trust is not putting like a secure website badge on there. You know what I mean? Like, everyone knows your website's secure, or they should. And if they're scared of it, they're probably not entering any information anyway. So don't put a great big huge picture of a padlock. It's not going to instill any trust that you think it is. Instilling trust would be, you're walking me through this, right? You're guiding me in a way that I can understand, in design that is simple. It's not confusing. You're moving me right through the process. You're answering my questions before they ever come up, which is the real true way to instill trust. Is don't make me ask the question, right? If you know me as your customer, right, then put your empathy hat on, figure that out. What's my question, and answer that before it comes up. That's the start of every beautiful customer experience, is knowing what that customer wants, expects, or questions, and then taking care of that ahead of time, right? So to me, the words that are used, the language that's used, knowing that I might get stuck in one particular spot on that, and then helping me through that. Like, for example, let's say you're on the burial side and you get to an outer burial container, right? Or are we not allowed to call them vaults anymore? All right, I'm gonna say vault because I'm not talking to a consumer, and I'm not a GPL, so I'll say vault. When they get to that, should there be something on there like, some cemeteries require this, others don't? Like, do I need to buy this? Can I skip this? Just those kind of things there that would make me feel comfortable with it. And here's one big thing too. I'm a huge fan when I'm not anxious, but when I'm uncertain about what I'm going through. I'm a big fan of pages that say, like, here's what happens next, right? Like, here's exactly the process that you're going to go through. So maybe even at the beginning of this, instead of just having like step 1, 2, 3, or 4, like across the top, that you have, here's what happens, and then, next, here's what's going to happen. You know what I mean? So you're walking them through that.
Like Dell computer, when you customize stuff, it's like, now you're customizing your RAM.
Yeah.
Now you're customizing your, I don't know.
Yeah, you are
hard drive capacity. Yeah. Yeah.
You're exactly right. You're just walking them through that. You're guiding them along that process. And I think that if that's not necessarily the responsibility of the IT company to do that, right? I mean, the tech companies build and write code. We have a developer, we love him to death, but he doesn't design anything, right? And Vance, if you're listening, we love you, man, but he doesn't design, right? He doesn't design. He writes amazing code, probably better than anyone I've ever seen. But others write that copy, right? Others, the tech companies aren't the ones to design that consumer experience. Those are two separate functions. Anyway, what do you guys think about other ways that you could instill trust for the consumer?
Yeah, I think just to harp on what you said, I think that having the empathy and understanding that there is a huge information asymmetry there when a first-time consumer enters into the funeral profession or experiences the funeral industry for the first time, right? You really know nothing, and this is such a huge, major life event. And so I think understanding that, you want to build that into the online process, right? And understanding that this person knows absolutely nothing.
Yep.
Even the I see it every day. And, like you went on vault and outer burial container, like to someone who has no idea, that means nothing.
Right.
But to you, that's something that you deal with every single day. So you often want to step back and really be able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. And I think the feeling side, funeral directors have that down. They understand grief. They understand how to make a family feel better, help them through that process. But at the same time, I think because they're so knowledgeable on this topic, they often think about how, I don't want to call them dumb, but like how naive or how little a family coming into this actually knows.
Absolutely.
So you take that into consideration when you're putting something out there, whether that be online or even in person.
Oh, absolutely. You nailed it right there, Tyler. You have to get into that customer's shoes. We hear, and we do this so often, like we just are oblivious to the fact sometimes that people don't know what we're talking about, right? We assume that they know what an outer burial container is, like you said, right? Or, one way, and we're doing another episode on this, so here's a tease. You look at funeral homes that put pricing on there and they put just a GPL. Mm-hmm. That's it. Like, so they're going to say, hey, we offer funeral pricing. It's on there. We put our GPL on there. To me, that is one of the craziest things out there because that is this monster menu. Nobody knows what to order. And could you imagine if that GPL was part of that checkout process? I wouldn't, do I need to know, honey, do we need refrigeration? I don't know. There's no idea what you need. You need a guide. You need to know. And so you need to design it for the person that knows the least, right? And just walk them through that. So if you get a superstar funeral professional that's done this 7 times before, great, right? They'll breeze right through this. But for the person that's never done it before, you have to make the experience beautiful for them, right? Or they're not going to do it. So
process, yeah.
Yeah. Any other ideas on ways to instill trust? What do you think, Welton?
Yeah, me personally, I keep on thinking back. If I do not know a product or service, typically I would shop around a couple or 2-3 websites. The one that gives me the most information are the one I will instill trust the most. Yep. And they're the one I'm going to call. Yep. Right? Versus somebody else who aren't transparent, who have no pricing on the website. I'm going to go with the one that's most transparent first. I will call them first.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean I won't call the other ones. I will call the ones that's the most transparent.
Yeah.
That build up their trust with me.
Yeah, that firm's going to get the edge.
Yeah.
So again, that's, so I'll say this. So this podcast, I don't know whether it's our 4th or 5th episode. We're just getting started on this. The idea behind this podcast was to help funeral homes learn to add value. Right. Mm-hmm. They're all worried about competing on price. Yeah. If they're not careful, and I don't mean to be an alarmist, but I just see a trend toward commoditization. Right. And I'm not saying that that's where it's going to end up. But if you don't, absent any value or differentiation that you show on your website, the only thing you can compare is price. Mm-hmm. And when you compare things on price alone, you are now entering into that realm of this being a commodity. So the only way you stop that is you add value. Right. You have to add more value. Okay. Adding this online checkout thing is adding value, right? It's adding value to the consumer, right? And it can also show some differentiation, right? So back to what you said about, you're going to go to the one that gives you the most information. Well, the one that gives you the most information truly is going to be the most empathetic provider because they're going to say, okay, what does he need to know? Right. Why is he on my page? And can I answer that question before he asks it? Right. So if you answer people's questions before they ask them, that they're in giving you the information. They're saying, I get you. I understand what you're going through. Come here. We're here with open arms. We'll take care of you. Right. Mm-hmm. That is a much better experience for the consumer, and they will have an edge if you do that. I can promise you that because we've seen that in every different industry. So, I mean, you think about it when you go and, well, I could probably think of 1,000 examples, but many times I've went to buy something that I don't know anything about. You're exactly right. And this one is just like, click here, add to cart. Over here, they walk you through the whole experience. So big difference. Well, listen, guys, I think we've probably went long enough. Tyler, we really appreciate you jumping on here.
Thank you.
Knowing a lot about what your information is super valuable to us, and I know the audience as well. Just again, we think that you guys should have this on there, not just because it's the pandemic. Get this on there because that's value. Get it on there because consumers are expecting it. Yeah. And make it on there because it's going to be a better experience, for that family. And you guys are going to need it, kind of going into the future. So we got a couple more cool episodes coming up. We think you guys will like them. Thank you for listening. If you are on any of the podcast channels, if you would go leave us a review, that would help us. And so until next time, see you guys.
Having me.
Bye-bye.